I mentioned earlier, you've heard several times tonight, both from myself and Steve, and of course our grant recipients. We've made a really conscious choice at the board level in partnership with the exec team to really give some laser focus on making a positive impact around financial abuse and domestic violence. We're not the experts, but we're courageous. We're going to start these conversations. We're going to make some changes. We'll learn as we go along. And as Stephen mentioned, we had a wonderful luncheon today with about 15, 16 other business leaders from across the community. So we're ready. I'm going to start with the conversation this evening. So maybe first of all, I'd really like to introduce Catherine Fitzpatrick. You can introduce yourself, and we can hear a little bit about Flequity. And maybe as part of that, Catherine, if you could just untangle some of these terms, financial abuse and its link with coercive control, domestic violence, and let's maybe zoom in on financial abuse, what it can actually look like, particularly as it comes through the banking sector itself. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Kerry. Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine Fitzpatrick, and I'm a social entrepreneur. I'm a former executive from a big bank, but don't hold it against me. So I run a social enterprise where the purpose is to disrupt financial abuse and gender bias through smarter product and service design. What do I mean by that? It means I want to understand the ways that people are misusing products, particularly banking products, to harm somebody else financially, so through domestic and family violence. And then to take steps to redesign those products to make it much harder to inflict that harm, and also to put the perpetrator in the frame. So somebody who wants to misuse that product or service to cause harm, to say it's not okay, and we don't want to be part of that system of abuse. A little bit about financial abuse, what is it, and how I came to it. So I'm the architect of Commonwealth Bank's domestic and family violence strategy, which we started after Rosie Batty became Australian of the Year in 2015. And our bank said we were open to the conversation that she asked us to have in the community, which is how do we play our part? So we looked at what we could do for our people, and then we said what can we do for our customers, and how do we use our scale and influence across the community? And what we learned at that time was financial abuse is something where a bank can have a role. It's where somebody uses money to control and manipulate somebody else. So they can withhold the access to money. There's another expression, economic abuse. So you could stop someone from earning money. And through the banking system, they could do things like rack up debt in somebody else's name, take out an account that then causes them to have hardship and not being able to pay that debt. That's got long-term impacts around credit scores, which means that there's a long tail to that financial abuse. You will have heard the expression coercive control, particularly in New South Wales, where it's a new law. And what that means is domestic violence has been recognised as it's not just one incident. So a lot of people think about physical violence, but coercive control is a pattern of behaviour, really to wear someone down so that they will do what you want, and so that you will keep them living in fear, so that they will then be complicit and be a shell of themselves. Financial abuse is one of those tactics. And the reason I care about it so much is coercive control is a lead indicator of homicide. And financial abuse is one of the reasons that a woman, and it's mainly women, but it can affect anybody, may have to choose between poverty or violence. And the time that they leave a relationship is when financial abuse could start, or it gets worse and it can stay for a long period of time. So I believe businesses have got a role to play. I'm on the National Plan Advisory Committee, I'm the business representative, and there is a clear role for businesses and banks in particular.
Thanks, Catherine. One of the examples as well you shared with our roundtable participants today, which many of us could probably relate to is if you're using digital banking, and that is making these really small transfers. Do you want to say a little more about that?
Yeah, so when I was at Commonwealth Bank, after the Prudential Review and the Royal Commission, where I was running the complaints team, I had a real privilege to set up a specialist customer vulnerability team looking after customers experiencing domestic and family violence. And one of them showed me the bank account of a woman that we were helping, and in it there were 1 cent transactions, deposits into her account. And in the message description, so where I write happy birthday or here's your pocket money kids, they were in the messages there were really serious, threatening, awful messages, 1 cent at a time. And and I asked the team, so, tell me about this. And one of them said, what's really chilling is when you see those and then you see, I love you, I want you back. So I was very privileged to have a team of data scientists, and I asked them, is this a thing? And they analysed 11 million transactions in a 3-month period, and what they found is 8,000 really serious forms of abuse being sent, and they detected the pattern. So it was 1 cent at a time, or as little as $1 at a time, multiple times, with really terrible words in them. I read one that was 900 messages long, 1 cent at a time, so it cost the sender $9, and it was in a period of only a couple of hours. And it said, I want to kill you, I want to kill them all, I'm standing out the front, unblock me from Facebook, all of these terrible threats in a bank account. We took that actually to the E-Safety Commissioner, and she said, why don't you apply some safety by design? No one in the women's safety sector, not one of our customers had ever complained about this. So it took one really fantastic staff member in my team to say, hey, there's a problem here, should we do something about it? And I'm really proud that all the banking industry in Australia has now moved on that.
Thanks, Catherine. Kellyanne, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about the work Zara Foundation is doing, but perhaps also too you can help us explore, how do we make these conversations even more inclusive? Because the data doesn't lie. There's no doubt this is heavily gendered in that females are the victims, but actually we know that there are also male victims and female perpetrators, and in fact we just had allegations come through, tried at the court here in Albury. It was in the Border Mail, I think only 10 days ago, with that situation. So, but more importantly perhaps, men, young boys are impacted because if you have grown up in a household where there is financial abuse or coercive control. I have grown up in that environment. As I said, as a young girl in the 70s and 80s here in Albury, it impacts on you for a lifetime, and that includes many young boys that then become young men themselves. And so, as I said, the data doesn't lie, but we need to engage all of us as a community to talk about these issues. Kellyanne.
Thank you. Look, before I kick off, I want to acknowledge that I'm from Ghanaland, otherwise known as Adelaide, and be grateful for the acknowledgement and welcome to country we had before we kicked off today. And within that, it's really important, whenever we're talking about domestic and family violence, to remember our First Nations women. They're up to 40% more likely to be hospitalised due to domestic and family violence, and the complexities in responding in community to First Nations people are fraught with issues over how, us Western ideology understands domestic and family violence. So I always like to keep them at the front of my mind when I'm talking to community members over domestic and family violence. It's great to be in Albury. What a great community you've got here, and how lucky are you to have the leadership of Hume Bank. I've been working in this space for 15 years in Australia. I'm from the UK, predominantly working in Queensland, now in Adelaide. Working with a lot of corporates over that time, and absolutely we've seen some leadership from the big fours, CommBank being the first, and we're seeing community-owned banks now starting to step up. But I can honestly say I don't know that any of them are quite doing the work with the commitment and integrity that Hume Bank is doing. So congratulations on your leadership in this space. It's incredibly inspiring. Zara Foundation, I'm the CEO of, and we specifically support women impacted by financial and economic abuse. We provide specialist financial counselling services, and similar to one of the grant recipients here today, group education and adult education programs, helping women look for opportunities of training, employment, and further education. So to your question, in terms of how do we be inclusive, look, I come from women's organisations, and we've had a strong, we've had to advocate really strongly in community about this issue, about the issue of gendered violence. And I think within that advocacy, we've left our boys and men behind. And often we've villainized them, and we've had this monster myth over who the person is who commits domestic and family violence or coercive control. I can tell you after 15 years of work, he's normally a really nice guy. He is a good father. He's incredibly charismatic. He will be your sports coach. He will be your work colleague. He's going to be your best mate. He's in this room tonight. So is she. Now, we need to create environments where him and her can reach out for support. There's a lot of reasons why people choose to use violence within their families, and that's complex. People need psychology, people need specialist support. But I think as a community, what I've learned over my career is specialist DV services, police and government, we can't solve domestic and family violence by ourselves. We need community members like all of you here today. And your role is to say to her, I believe you, I hear you, there's support out there, but also to say to him, come on mate, we don't do that no more. It's not cool, get help. And I think that's a powerful message we can tell, we can say to our family members, community members, colleagues, but sometimes something we feel a little bit scared about. We don't want to get involved, we don't want to make things worse, we don't want to trigger another incident of harm. And I've worked with thousands of women and men who use violence, and they've all said, particularly victims, I wish somebody had said to me, are you okay? Are you safe? And there's support out there. So my message for you all here tonight is be courageous. If you're concerned over somebody, let them know you're concerned. And if you're worried that somebody in your close network might be using violence and abuse, let them know there's support out there. There's a men's referral line and men's support lines as well.
And of course, we do have a lot of our local experts and those in the frontline services here, of course, this evening, which is fantastic. Catherine, talk to us a little bit more about the work that you're actually doing with organisations, and maybe particularly, of course, in the financial services sector. I mean, what role can we play? We're just at the beginning of our journey at Hume Bank. But we know that there's lots to be done, and we just need to start somewhere. So tell me, what are you seeing and working on with other organisations?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I needed to get it out of my head, and I wrote a paper called Design to Disrupt, which was taking what I had heard from victim survivors, from customers, from people who work in the women's safety sector about the ways that our customers were interacting with us in banks. And really trying to say, well, I know we're trying to provide a lot more support, but what about if we look at the ways that perpetrators are misusing our products and services? Could we redesign them to make them safer? So I went through product by product and said, well, in a credit card, they're being opened online pretty easily, pretty quickly, in somebody else's name without their knowledge or consent. So here you go. What about if we put a bit more friction into the system and made that much harder to do without checking with another person? That might be a way that you could interrupt that financial abuse. And I went through a lot of different products. As a result of writing that paper, one of the recommendations I made was that every bank should put in their terms and conditions we don't want you to misuse our products and services for financial abuse because it's really serious and it's got long-term consequences. So if you do, there'll be consequences for you. And the aim of this was not to say we're going to close your accounts and you can never bank with anybody ever again. It was actually to change behaviour and to say let's just treat each other with respect and then provide that greater protection from financial abuse. Hume Bank is one of the banks that's adopted that recommendation. When I first made it, no one had ever done it before. And I did it because when we introduced some terms and conditions in a couple of the banks I worked in around the abuse in the payment descriptions, when we wrote letters to customers who were sending that abuse, more than 90% stopped when they got the letter saying, we can see you, you need to stop it. So I said, why don't we give this a try? By the end of last year, 13 banks had moved on that, and then I launched a campaign called Respect and Protect in May this year to encourage others to follow suit. I think it's pretty extraordinary. 6 months later, there's more than 35 companies across 8 different sectors representing more than 20 million customers in Australia that have adopted that. Because all of them have said, we don't want to be like the social media companies who are just watching this harm happening on the platforms. We didn't mean for that to happen, so we want to make it safer. And so I'm really delighted by that. So I think I'm seeing that when I say 8 sectors, so that's banking, superannuation, general insurance, water. There is an energy company about to announce it. A university has adopted it, a transport company, and a little fintech. So I think so I'm working with businesses to take those practical steps to say, please educate yourself, please realise that there are these harms happening you might not have known about, and then please do something about it.
Thanks, Catherine. And just a heads up, I might open it up if there's any questions in a couple of moments. What about we can design our products and services and ensure they're not being weaponised. What about in terms of how can we support our work colleagues, Kellyanne? Because we're not only providers of products and services, we're employers. What can we do in the workplace?
That's a great question, and I think, am I still on? Yeah. I'm still on, great, okay. It's a wonderful question. I think going back to what I said earlier, sometimes we've overcomplicated the responses to domestic and family violence. It is a complex issue, but the way community can respond can be more simple. So when I'm talking to business owners and corporates or other organisations, government agencies, in relation to how they support their workforce, I say we need to look at this and think of this like mental health. So there was a time when we wouldn't feel comfortable to intervene when we were concerned over somebody's mental health. We thought we needed to be a psychologist or a counsellor. And if we asked that question, we were going to open up Pandora's box, and then what do we do with it? And we're causing that person more harm than good. And it's kind of been a bit like that with DV. So we've just ignored it. But the unintended consequence of doing that is we've kept DV behind closed doors. And if it's behind closed doors, it's facilitating an environment where he can do more of that because it's a domestic issue. And we know now DV is not a domestic issue. It's actually criminal. We've criminalised coercive control. It's a community issue, and we've all got a role to play. So I think, like Are You OK Day, where we now know it's okay to say to people, are you okay? We can say to people in the workplace, are you safe? Is your relationship safe? And we can let them know there's help. I think in order to do that, we need to facilitate cultures and community where people can be vulnerable. And displaying vulnerability helps facilitate vulnerability. So just like yourself here, thank you for sharing your story and being so courageous. You're a chair of a bank and you're here being incredibly vulnerable, sharing your own story, and that facilitates, I think, an environment where others can say, oh, if that was Kerry, I can say, it's me too.
Thanks, Kelly. And I won't lie, I was really nervous, actually. I had a practice run at the Roundtable Forum, but I decided to because I thought, well, if not me, maybe who? You know, and by that I mean we have to bring it out from the shadows. We have to talk about it because it's the only way that we'll drive positive action. And from that experience, what I think I flagged earlier, you know, what it really taught me is it can happen to anyone. I think our friends locally in Albury-Wodonga would have looked at our family and thought, wow, things are pretty good, built a lovely home in a lovely part of Albury-Wodonga. But for many years, it was our dirty family secret, to be honest, many, many years. And it's not a one-off incident or a little phase or a stage. It has really, really long-lasting impacts. So I've decided to be really brave, but I also too want to acknowledge the really braveness of actually Hume Bank because, you know, as a board, the executive and team, this would be a topic it would be really easy to have sort of kept walking past because it feels awkward, feels really awkward. But I said right at the beginning of my chair's address, I think we are a proud and impactful institution. We can really play a leadership role. And even if that just starts with asking the question, are you safe at home? Are you emotionally safe? I think that's a small but great step forward. So, yeah.
Can I just add to that? And I hope you're okay.
I am okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was talking to a survivor advocate a couple of weeks ago and she was telling me how it took her, she was in her violent relationship, an abusive and controlling relationship for 16 years. And it took her, after she decided to leave, 5 years to do that. And what she said is that a couple of people asked her, are you safe? Are you okay? And they only asked her once. And she wasn't safe to disclose at that time. And she said, I don't know if this would have made a change, but if they maybe had have asked me again, and when I was ready, maybe it wouldn't have taken 16 years or 5 years when she made that decision. And so one of the things she was saying to me is, I wish on every bill that was sent out from any company or any bank statement, it just said, are you safe at home? Here's who you can contact. And just make it more normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have any questions? Otherwise we'll... Oh, we have one right down the front here. Here you go. I'm going to... And I promise, yes, we'll... No. You go down the front and then I promise we'll come back to you.
Hi, my name's Carla. I'm an occupational therapist here locally, and mine's probably more of a comment than anything that it probably extends also to our vulnerable populations of people with disabilities and also our older adults, and so people who don't really have a voice. So sometimes that asking the question, there's people that can't always respond in the right way, so it's trying to be really tuned in to what's going on. You've got carers abusing the financial position of people that they look after, those types of things. That, you know, it's an extension of all of that. So it was just more of a comment.
Nice, good point.
Yeah, excellent point.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, what sort of support do you need or do you expect or don't you get from our judiciary?
Ooh.
How long do we have?
I will hand this over to one of the experts. Experts, which one would you like to, just some initial comments?
Look, you know, New South Wales is leading the way in terms of law reform. You've recently, there's been some change in terms of bail. So you would know from the media there's been a spate of homicides across Australia, but in New South Wales, and it's been identified that, you know, a lot of guys are being let back out in the community after harming. You've got GPS monitoring now, so they're the ankle bracelets which are being used here in New South Wales, and obviously the criminalising of coercive control. I've worked a lot with police and I've worked a lot with magistrates, prosecution and defence lawyers, and I can tell you there's a lot of goodwill, but we've got a very complex justice system, and family law is very complex as well. And it was designed by men for men, dare I say. And we're seeing a lot of systems abuse because of that as well. But we've got government will at both local, state and federal level, and there's good people working in those systems trying to do what they can, so there's hope.
Yeah, thank you. And it really will take a whole of community response, won't it? Because I think sometimes you look at the judiciary, police not getting the funding that they need, our own local services requiring funding, and I think it can be really easy to think, if we could just get policing or judiciary but actually we can all take steps, and we really do need this sort of whole of community approach, don't we? Terrific. So, as I said, we've been brave here as an organisation, and thank you all as well for joining in this conversation. Catherine, maybe to you first. I mean, if there's one thing that maybe, I don't know if it's a call to action, but one thing you'd like our guests today to be maybe either thinking about or do as they leave today.
Yeah. I'm going to take 3, if that's okay. 3 slightly different ones. For those of you who are customers and members of Hume, I'd really encourage you to back this work. It's really important, and I think it's really fantastic, the leadership role that you are taking, and I congratulate you on that. So having the backing of all of your members and customers is going to be really important. I would say to anybody who's in business, please think about the ways that your products and services might be used or misused by your customers to inflict harm, and join Respect and Protect if you'd like to join the movement. And thirdly, if anyone ever discloses to you, please believe them.
Yeah. Thanks, Catherine. Kellyanne.
Look, the disclosure thing is a big thing. I think the message I'd probably like to add on top of that is most people don't know they're in DV when they're in DV. It gets complex then. So any opportunity you've got to raise awareness within your communities, sporting communities, education, businesses around what are the tactics of coercive control, because we hear from a lot of women when they see that spelt out or read out, then they go, gosh, that might be me, and then hopefully this disclosures are believed. Moving on from that, and if you get an opportunity, practical assistance. So women don't leave because of the fear of homelessness or extreme poverty, and women tell us they return because of that same fear. The fear is a reality. You look at the stats of people falling into homelessness correlated with domestic and family violence. So I thought it was great. The grant recipients from Hume's community safety grants, well, it was a lot of practical assistance to people, and women tell us all the time that they really need that. So if you can give, do that. That's helpful.
Thanks, Kellyanne. Thanks, everyone. We're going to just about bring the evening to a formal close, but then I do hope you'll hang around and either come and chat to Kellyanne and Catherine, and of course members, directors. And I just want to say, it was 2-3 years ago at the board table, and it was actually a retired board member that kept banging on about, let's do something more with our AGM. Let's do something. Come on, we can't just get 8 people turning up and a few votes. Let's be courageous and bold. And we've now been pretty courageous and bold for 2 years, and we're growing. We may need to find a new venue, which is really exciting and a wonderful problem to have. But I really want to thank all of our members and our partners for coming out tonight. I hope you're also inspired about the impact that we can have as an organisation and as a community beyond just banking products and services. So thank you again. As I said, I hope to see you at a bigger venue next year with maybe 400 people if we keep doubling. Not quite Berkshire Hathaway, Michael Goebel, but we're working on it. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. A special thank you as well to our guests who have joined us here both this evening and today with our roundtable forum with other local businesses. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you up the back for a drink and a great conversation. Thank you.